My name is Nathan Tavin, and I serve as the outreach pastor here at County Line Church of God, where I oversee our local outreach and our global missions teams. In working with our global missions teams, I oversee our missions teams that consist of people who volunteer here at County Line Church that are on these teams. They work with me in connecting with our missionaries, both here in the U.S. and overseas, as well as our teams that help our county liners who want to go on short-term missions trips as well. And then I also work with teams that oversee local outreach opportunities, such as our Faith in Action, our First Stop, our food pantry, and that sort of thing. Through our global missions ministry, I often take some trips just to help me see the ministry context in which our missionaries are working within, as well as to take some scout trips and visit places where we want to ultimately send teams to, or places where we want to establish some partnerships with. Recently, I was able to take a trip to Cairo, Egypt, as well as Athens, Greece. And these trips kind of served a couple of different purposes. One, the trip to Cairo, Egypt was centered around the Three Worlds Roundtable, which I have the opportunity to serve on. And the Three Worlds Roundtable serves as an advisory council to the regional director of Europe and Middle East. And these annual meetings will meet at various places around Europe where they have missionaries or churches that are in these countries. And as a roundtable, what we do is we are able to help advise them where they can have some accountability in terms of decision making that they do, in terms of strategic initiatives that they want to take, as well as some financial advice in dealing with missionaries and bringing new missionaries on board and that sort of thing. So we get an opportunity, or I get an opportunity to hear about the entire region in terms of where things are healthy, where things are hurting, whether it has to do with churches and or missionaries. Also, we get to hear case studies, and we get to speak into different case studies, again, of just helping them think strategically through some steps that are coming up. And so we have the opportunity as a church, and me as an outreach pastor, of getting some firsthand insight into what is going on in Europe and Middle East in terms of missions. It also gives us a chance, as we work with Dave and Kathy Simpson, who are missionaries in Bulgaria, to kind of get to see from their overseeing board or their overseeing directors where they are taking what they're wanting to do with Dave and Kathy, where they are taking Dave and Kathy, as well as when we used to support Aaron and Nicole Varner and any other missionaries that we support or in the future will support in Europe and Middle East. When I'm on trips like this, I always like to maximize my time and my travel schedule. And so knowing that I was going to be in Cairo for about a week, I also wanted to extend my trip and go up to Athens, Greece, where I also met Patrick Noctegal, who is the regional coordinator in Europe and Middle East, and Dave and Kathy Simpson, our missionaries to Bulgaria, who have over the last year been working with the church in Athens. Much like Cairo, Athens is in the news a lot. A lot of unrest is going on in terms of the economic situation. There's a high unemployment rate, just a sense of uneasiness in that country and in the city of Athens. And so right now, there's just a great opportunity on a larger scale for the gospel to be shared in places like Cairo and Athens. And it takes the local church and missionaries or local people to understand this opportunity that they now have in terms of wanting to spread the gospel. And so knowing and hearing about the Church of God in Athens is kind of resurfacing, and they have some opportunities that they are wanting to step out and grab a hold of during these hard economic times. The Church of God in Athens is making a resurrection of sorts. They are an older congregation, I would say primarily made up of 70 and 80-year-olds, and they have a new pastor who is younger, in his 50s, but so he's kind of considered a younger pastor in that region and in that country as well. But he has a huge heart, a tremendous heart for outreach. The church itself is actually located in a neighborhood called Exarchia, and this is kind of known as the inner city of Athens. There's a big university there where we see demonstrations happening on the television. Most of those are taking place in Exarchia, in this neighborhood. There's just lots of issues that come with the inner city and things that we think of in terms of just when you have a university setting, high unemployment rate, students, just lots of issues. And so there's lots of opportunities for outreach. Lots of immigrants are in Athens as well. And actually one research that I looked up said that 80% of all immigration, or 80% of immigrants that come to Europe actually come through the port of Athens. And so there's an opportunity there as well for this church in Athens, Greece, to have a major impact on spreading the gospel throughout the world and having a tremendous impact on Athens as well and in their neighborhood. The Anarchist, which is actually a political group in Athens, Greece, they have their headquarters in the same neighborhood as well. You see lots of immigrants who are homeless, living on the streets and trying to sell their items on the streets to make some kind of income. So lots of opportunity for outreach to take place. The building, it's a big building. It's probably one of the largest church buildings that we have as a Church of God in Europe. It seats over 250 people. There's 3 different levels for activity. You could have a feeding center there for homeless people. You have church services. You could have people living upstairs or having a hangout for university students upstairs as well. So there's tremendous opportunity there for outreach to take place. And the other thing that is drawing us kind of to Athens is Dave and Kathy Simpson. They have been working in Bulgaria now for the last 8 years, maybe 9 years. And for the last year, they have actually been connecting with the church in Athens, Greece, because Bulgaria borders Greece just to the north, and so it makes sense. It's easy for them to travel to Athens. And so they've been traveling there about once a month, once every 6 weeks, working with the church there, working with the pastor, helping them to kind of move beyond their current situation and taking steps in how can we reach out to people, how can we grow the church, how can we cultivate a heart for outreach. So when we look at Athens and the church in Athens and all the opportunities that are there, as well as having Dave and Kathy Simpson involved there, our team, our global ministry partners team, is looking at Athens as a potential sister church opportunity. And so that was part of the reason in me going as well, and visiting Athens, meeting the pastor, being there in the church, seeing the ministry context and all the opportunities. And along with that, working with Three Worlds. They really see Athens as a tremendous opportunity in all of Europe to really grow the gospel, as well as allowing the Athens facility to be a center of gravity, center of ministry. Maybe conferences could be held there, sending teams over there to understand urban ministry and working in the inner city. So lots of great things are happening in Athens. Many more great things could happen in Athens. There are some things that have to fall into place first before we take that next step. So we are praying and continue to talk about the church in Athens. You heard me talk a lot about Three Worlds and maybe wondering what that means or what that is. Three Worlds is really the name that has been given to the Europe and Middle East region of the missions arm of the Church of God. The Church of God has divided up the global map into 5 regions, and in those regions they have regional directors or regional coordinators. And Patrick and Jamie Noctegal serve as the regional coordinator for Europe and Middle East. And they wanted to change the culture of global missions in terms of what it takes to reach the local church and to help assist the local church, I guess I would say. And so they came up with the name Three Worlds. And what that means is there are 3 worlds of Christianity that they have seen and that they work with. The first one is the traditional world. And in that world, most of us here in Northeast Indiana are very familiar with that in terms of we know who God is, we know what the church is about, we know where to find God in terms of, hey, there's a church. If I want to get my life straightened out, if I want to change things, I'm going to probably start with the church. The second world is a postmodern or post-Christian world. And this we see a lot in what Europe is right now, as well as a lot of other places in the United States, big urban settings, Chicago, LA, New York, where when somebody wants to find out about God or wants to know more about God, they don't know to go to a church, or they don't necessarily understand what a church is all about, or may feel like church is for weak-minded people or older people, and that's the same thing in Europe as well, and where you see the decline of Christianity and the decline of churches in Europe is a lot of people coming away or moving away from the church, and they're many generations removed from ever attending a church. The third world is the Book of Acts world, and we see this world in Asia, Africa, Latin America, the Middle East, and this world has a tendency towards the supernatural. And when they read things in the Bible that talks about God doing miraculous things, they believe it without hesitation. And when the Bible talks about war, rumors of war, poverty, hunger, they live these things out. And so it's much different from our Western mindset here in the United States or in Europe. But through this world, we're seeing tremendous church growth. Those regions I just mentioned, those are some of the fastest growing regions in the world in terms of people coming to know Christ, and the churches are exploding in those areas, opposite of what's happening in Europe and the United States. And so Patrick Noctegal, he has taken these three worlds and tied them into his ministry in Europe and Middle East. And he explains these three worlds when he's talking to churches. And a lot of times what you'll find is, for Bulgaria as an example, you have a church that is set up in a traditional means, in a traditional way, and they're trying to do outreach and trying to reach out to their friends in a very postmodern, post-Christian culture. And then they get frustrated when, hey, why aren't these people responding when we're trying to invite them to church or trying to do different things? And so it just takes some explanation as to what these different worlds mean, how you adjust, and that's what the three worlds has become, or that's what the three worlds is. Patrick and Jamie Noctegal, they serve as the regional coordinators there. They have served on the mission field in Hong Kong for several years. And they just have some very dynamic ways of reaching out to help these local churches. Obviously, a big focus of theirs is on their missionaries in these regions. Dave and Kathy Simpson are one of those missionaries. But a part of that, they also are working with these local churches. There are 18 countries within Europe and Middle East that have a Church of God congregation, or at least one. And many of these churches are isolated. It would be like County Line being the only Church of God congregation in all of the state of Indiana. And so you have these isolated churches in these countries where there's postmodern, post-Christian culture, and these pastors or the leaders of these churches are feeling very lonely, very isolated, really left without hope. And so what Patrick and Jamie are trying to do is to network with these churches, bringing these churches and these leaders together, helping them to feel like they are not isolated, equipping them, helping them with seminars, conferences, networking opportunities, and as well as getting them connected with sister churches back in the States too. There are three things that give me a lot of confidence with Patrick and Jamie and the Three Worlds team and the Three Worlds concepts that they have. The first is that they're very strategic thinking in their thinking. They're forward thinking. They think about 2-3 steps down the line in terms of what their team needs to look like, the places that are a high priority throughout Europe, and their family structure as well. And they're concerned about the missionaries' family structure. So they're very strategic in how they think missionally and how they want to bring partner churches on board as well. The second thing is that they're accountable. They hold themselves accountable to the Three Worlds Roundtable, to other pastors, to other churches. They're not just the Lone Ranger out there making decisions all by themselves. And lastly, they're very transparent. They're very open. with their thinking, with their thoughts, with their ideas. They're not closed-minded. They want to make themselves better as better missionaries, as regional coordinators, and so they're very transparent in their thoughts and in their strategy. There's lots of exciting things that are happening in Europe and Middle East right now, but I just want to take a moment to share a few of what I've seen and heard. The first exciting thing that is happening is in Hungary, where you have two pastors who were childhood friends. They're serving in different congregations, but they're working together in strengthening their congregations, as well as their two churches are going to be planting a new church in downtown Budapest. And so that is very exciting to hear their heart, to hear their vision, their strategy behind that. The second one is in Italy. For a long time, we've always heard about churches closing down in Europe. And here in northern part of Italy, in a place called Arco, they have planted two new churches there with Spanish-speaking congregations. And so it's exciting to see that these two new churches have started and beginning to grow, get some momentum going, and that sort of thing. And the third one is in Paris. The leadership and really the congregation there is filled of immigrants from Lebanon and Egypt. And so you have this church in Paris that they speak in Arabic and translate into French. And one of their hearts in the city of Paris is to reach out to the Muslims who Paris has a large Muslim population. So they're doing a lot of great things. They're reaching across denominational lines and partnering with other Arabic-speaking churches in Paris, not only for encouragement of one another, but also to think through how they can reach out to Muslims. So there's some exciting things along with Athens, and so I'm really excited about the outcome. I'm excited about continuing partnership with missionaries and the Macrogals in Europe and Middle East.